So hi, I'm Dr. Therese House from House Family Chiropractic, and today we're doing a seminar on our Focus On workshop on ADHD. Okay. So first, living with ADHD. Having ADHD or being the parent of a child who does can be very challenging, and the rates are largely on the rise. The numbers are, grab my little packet. The numbers are increasing at a very rapid rate. Currently, between 4 to 17% of children will be diagnosed with ADHD in their lifetime. And in Michigan specifically, in 2007, the number of children who are currently diagnosed were 8.2%, and in 2011, that jumped up to 11.2%. So, in 4 years, that is a pretty big jump overall. Fortunately, there are many ways though that we can improve the symptoms of ADHD in a very natural way. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on, is natural ways to help to improve the symptoms that correspond. So first, when a lot of people hear the diagnosis of ADHD, they automatically think, okay, well that child or that adult, because that's the other largest population that is being diagnosed with ADHD, is actually in adults. The amount of medications being prescribed for adults with ADHD is rising immensely. And when a lot of people hear that diagnosis, that's the first thing they think of is, I gotta get on meds. But that's really not the case. There are now several medications that are on the market to specifically control the symptoms of ADHD. A few of those are Ritalin, Concerta, Strattera, just to name a few. But there was a list overall that I found of about 10 drugs in 3 different classes. So there is a whole lot out there. Now these medications do the best to mask the symptoms of ADHD, but as soon as the medication ceases, the symptoms will return right away. So it's doing nothing to actually help the person or their body function better. All it's doing is just covering up the way that they're acting or the symptoms they're displaying. And long-term use studies in adults showed an increase in heart rate, increased blood pressure, tremors, changes in mood, confusion, paranoia, hallucinations, delusions, and irregular breathing, all the result of long-term use of these medications. Okay? And that's the biggest thing that they've even noticed in children. A lot of these kids have never, or I should say the medications, have never been tested for long-term use in kids. So they really don't know what a kid is going to act like who's been on this medication since they were 6, 7 years old, what they're going to act like as an adult. Will those medications even work for them anymore? Will they not? Will they have correct brain development? Will they not? No one really knows, and those medications really do work to change how your body functions overall in an unnatural way, and it works as a really big stimulant to our nervous system overall, so it changes our nervous system, how it's able to function. And if you think, if we're changing how our body can function in little kids, they're growing up to adults, so you know it's also going to change their growth patterns. So another disadvantage of ADHD medications is that they have a plethora of side effects, including nausea, stomach pain, vomiting, headaches, insomnia, loss of appetite, dizziness, irritability, and mood swings, and increased anxiety. And those are all just from short-term use. And then, apparently this is what that's supposed to go on. The long-term use side effects are listed there below. Some other side effects: fatigue, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, hallucinations, severe rash and blistering, shortness of breath, seizures, and numbness. So long, long list. So what we've really noticed though overall is that the best initial way to try and prevent ADHD or any other developmental types of disorders is to really focus on having a healthy pregnancy. So staying healthy during pregnancy can help the child avoid developing ADHD or any other developmental disorders. Studies have found that women who smoke tobacco or consume alcohol during pregnancy have a much greater chance of having a child with ADHD. So eating a natural, healthy diet while pregnant will help to ensure that your child will have the nutrients they need to develop a healthy mind and brain. Now, omega-3s is necessary for proper brain development. That's going to be the largest nutrient for brain development. And what they even noticed is that omega-3 is used so much in pregnant women and in development of the baby and of the baby's nervous system that it actually takes 3 years for a woman who has had a child to replenish her own omega-3 reserves, that it is safer really for her to have another child. So they're really, really dependent. The developing baby is very dependent on the mother for those nutrients that they need, and really need a whole lot of it. So also it's important to try and stay relaxed during your pregnancy, get plenty of sleep, and try to not cause stress on the baby. So one other thing that they've really noticed is that while some people do have ADHD, it is definitely a widely misdiagnosed disorder. I actually was earlier today reading even a study from Michigan State that they had done, and they had noticed that especially in Michigan there is a large number of people who are misdiagnosed with ADHD. They also noticed that when there is a child who is the younger child in class, they have a much, much higher risk of being diagnosed with ADHD because they just don't have the same development that a child who maybe only a few months earlier would have. What they even noticed in the study was that in the state of Michigan, I guess that if you were born December 1st or earlier, if you have that birthday, then you can be placed in the, and you can go into school that year. Well, if you're born December 2nd or later, you have to wait till the next school year to enter school. But what they noticed is that there was a large difference in the number of kids with a December 1st birthday who were diagnosed with ADHD. It was much higher than the December 2nd birthday. So just having that extra time for the child to develop more decreased that diagnosis, because when a lot of people are looking at a child and their appropriate behavior, they look at it a lot based on the grade or their peers who they're with. If they're younger, they may have less appropriate behavior because they almost have the behavior of the year before them. And if your child has been diagnosed with ADHD, or you believe that he or she may have it, make sure that the diagnosis comes from a reputable mental health professional that specializes in ADHD. And that's to help prevent that misdiagnosis. So that's, what we've heard more and more is even of pediatricians just diagnosing a child with ADHD and then prescribing them medications right away, instead of maybe going to a psychologist or psychiatrist and getting their professional opinion on it also. Yeah. Also talk to your child about the difficulties that he or she may be having to get to the underlying cause overall. So some non-ADHD causes for the inability to focus can include dyslexia, and that's going to affect their development or their ability to read. So if they can't really read or comprehend as much what's going on in the class, they may seem like they're more disruptive just because they don't know what's going on. Also, the learning style of the student, if that does not match the teaching style of the classroom, they just might be less interested. If they're less interested, they're going to tend to be more disruptive in the class overall, and that's going to then put them in that ADD portion of that ADHD diagnosis. Also, being bored in school, so children like adults can have trouble concentrating, especially when something is too easy. So if you believe that the child may not be being challenged enough at school, you may want to consider asking the school to provide an aptitude test for the child, or an IQ test, to see if they should be placed in a class that is more stimulating to them, or maybe they can just be given some different things in the class to help stimulate their attention more. Also, on the vice versa of that is the material to advance for them. Maybe they missed some things in the step before, so then they don't understand what's going on in the classroom, which means they're not going to pay attention as much. Also, is there any emotional or behavioral causes there? Is there any tension in their home life? Is the child being bullied? Maybe they don't like being at school because of that. Are there stresses that are affecting his or her ability to concentrate overall? Because really, just like an adult, if we're stressed a lot because of outside things in our world going on, it's harder for us to focus at work, right? And on our tasks at hand. Well, same thing with a child, because really school is their work. So diagnosing ADHD incorrectly can be detrimental to the child's emotional and physical well-being, especially when the solution that you choose is medication. because those medications, like we talked about, have some very serious side effects, and they're going to really affect that child overall. Fortunately, there are some natural remedies to help alleviate the symptoms of ADHD that do not have the negative side effects, and that's really what we're going to focus on from here on out. Therefore, if someone is misdiagnosed with ADHD and is treated with natural, healthy remedies, his or her health can only really improve because we're working on just making their bodies healthier and function better. So first thing, this is going to be focusing more on the diet aspect first. First thing is going to be remove food additives and dyes. And this is really a huge part of the whole puzzle, especially when we're talking about the symptoms of ADD and ADHD. The big thing I want to talk about first would be the food dyes. Now, in the United States, we are one of the few countries that still allow food dyes in our food, because so many other countries realize that they are very unhealthy for you. They actually are neurotoxins. So when we ingest them, our body starts processing it, breaks them down, and they actually start to become toxic to our nervous system, which controls how our whole body functions. And for example, in Great Britain, they do not allow any artificial food colorings. But for example, even for red dyes, they use beetroot instead, yellow annatto, blue paprika. They use all these other natural things to help get that same color, but without having those detrimental neurological side effects. So you really want to remove the additives and dyes and preservatives from the diet overall. So if it's not natural, don't eat it. So my general rule is, if you look at the back of a package and you cannot pronounce, or you read an ingredient and you're like, what is that? It's probably not a good thing to eat. Or you can use the other way, that if it's not grown, since it doesn't come out of the ground or from a tree, it's not good to eat. So many dyes are synthesized from petroleum, which can carry toxic byproducts, including mercury, arsenic, and lead. And we all know how really you don't want to be ingesting any of these things, right? They don't even want you around, especially kids, rooms with lead paint in it, right? Because they're worried about the chips falling off, you eating them, or the child eating them, and then ingesting lead, because they know it's so detrimental to our overall health. But they're allowing that to be put in our foods. So studies have shown that food dyes, and this study specifically showed yellow 5 and yellow 6, but still blues and reds, very neurotoxic also, increase hyperactivity in children, especially in those who have the ADHD symptomatology. So because they are neurostimulants overall. So the dyes have also been linked to long-term health problems and disease. This here is an example, and this is again talking about Great Britain, but this is an example of a Kraft food box from the US that they have in their international food department at Great Britain. I know it's weird for us to think of Kraft Foods as international, but it can be considered that. And they actually have to put warning labels on all of their foods that have those food dyes in it. And their warning label, here I know it's hard to read, so I'm going to read it for you. That warning label says that the product can have adverse effects on activity and attention in children. So basically, that it can cause issues with being able to concentrate and hyperactivity, which are the two sections of the ADHD diagnosis. Right there from it, and that's what other countries require to be put on their food labels, because they understand the detriment that that can have to our overall health. So a big thing also is to eliminate sugar. So that's going to be mainly your white processed sugars. Okay? Sugar and processed foods have been known to worsen the symptoms of ADHD, including inattention, irritability, hyperactivity, and the mood swings. So especially when we're talking about white sugar and white flour when we're talking about processed foods. Those things are not naturally white. They are dyed. They are bleached out. That's why a lot of times it's called like bleached flour or bleached sugar. It's bleached out, and that's what makes it then white overall. And when we're eating that, then you're still ingesting the chemicals that they use to make that sugar white or that flour white. So once again, we're digesting more chemicals that our body really doesn't know how to process overall, and it can create some symptomatology in us. Also, sugar compromises the immune system, contains no essential nutrients, and can make it more difficult for the body to be able to process out toxins overall. So when we're talking about the immune system issue, okay, what sugar does is sugar weakens our immune system by feeding bacteria and feeding viruses. Their number one thing they like to eat is that white processed sugar. That's also a big reason why, and we all think of it coincidentally, that it all seems like no matter how early winter starts, right around that Christmas time, right after is when so many kids start to get the old buggy, nasty, clogged up stuff, and they all end up getting sick. Well, that's because their body has been weakened by all the junk that they're basically eating from the holidays. Now, one thing I wanted to do is, because I think a lot of us don't even realize the amount of sugar that we put in our kids' lunches. Because some things that we would have thought before as quote-unquote healthy or adequate good snacks for kids really are not healthy choices for them. So I thought I would change some of the, to make it a little bit more easy for us to relate to. Change some of the nutritional facts around, and I give you a different description of it. So what I did is I took the grams of sugar that was in a product and equated that to the number of sugar cubes that you're feeding your child. So when you look at Jell-O, so J-E-L-L-O, right? The Jiggler snack that we all like. Oh, let's get that back. Perfect. That actually, even though a lot of people see Jell-O as a health food, it has 16 grams of sugar, and that's going to be the amount in one of those little snack cups. That equates to 4 sugar cubes. So that's just like basically giving your child 4 sugar cubes. Not something you would probably normally do. Pudding has 18 grams of sugar. Which then equate to 4.5 sugar cubes. Go-Gurt, so the little sticks that I think are all the rage now with kids, they all want it in their lunch. This was on the lowest one that I could find was 9 grams of sugar, which is 2.25 sugar cubes that you're giving them. Welch's Fruit Snacks, which I know is a very popular snacks in school because I have been at schools reading to them and I have seen the teacher handing out those fruit snack packets to all of the kids in class. They have 15 grams of sugar or 3.75 sugar cubes. So if your child is getting that at 10:30, how do you think their behavior is going to be after that? They're probably going to be a little bit hyper. If someone just gave me that much sugar cubes, I'd be hyper. Twinkies have 18 grams of sugar, or 4.5 sugar cubes. A Capri Sun fruit drink, which at least when I was a kid, was the popular one, has 20 grams of sugar, so 5 sugar cubes. I was also kind of looking at some breakfast foods. So a half cup of Frosted Flakes is going to be equivalent to 3 sugar cubes. And a Nutri-Grain bar, also 3 sugar cubes. So when we look at that as even like one snack, you may think, oh, well, that's not that much or that's not too bad. But if we look at a child's lunch, I mean, at least when I was in school, I mean, it was normal for you to probably get like a Jell-O cup or yogurt, maybe, and a fruit snack and a juice box, all in your lunch. I mean, along with a sandwich or something else too. But those were all snacks. So if we're looking at between the juice box, your fruit snacks, and your Jell-O, let's see, you have just had 7.75 plus 5, 13? Oh, 13. Nope, 12. 0.75? Okay, I can't do math apparently. Sugar cubes. And that is a whole lot. I mean, you're looking at as much, if not more, than the amount of sugar in a Coca-Cola. Right? That's a lot of sugar overall for kids. And this here is even one of the food labels from the Nutri-Grain bar box, which a lot of us probably think Nutri-Grain bars, that's going to be one of the healthier snack bars to choose, especially for kids. Well, if you look at it, the number one ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. So the first number one ingredient in there is sugar. It also has your food dyes in there, highlighted or crossed, a couple of them. So overall, definitely not the best and the healthiest choice to be making for our kids. So when a lot of people think, oh, okay, well, I know a super easy way that I'll eliminate their sugar or the white sugar that they eat. I'll give them all the sugar-free diet stuff. But, thank you for shaking your head. But still, a lot of people see that and they think that is a really good alternative for their kids because they're not getting the sugar, even a great alternative for them and their body. Stop that thinking right there. It is the exact opposite. Those artificial sweeteners are actually worse for your body than the real sugar is. The two most common artificial sweeteners are going to be your aspartame and your Splenda, which all have side effects, very large side effects. On the aspartame side here, two side effects that definitely jump out at me first for this talk here are going to be your ADD and your hyperactivity, because those are both direct side effects of aspartame consumption. Now, a lot of people end up consuming aspartame and not even realizing it, just in some of the foods that they eat. Like if you do a light yogurt or one of the 90-calorie yogurts, you're eating aspartame. Usually not something that you think of overall with that, because it doesn't say that, sugar-free on the label. Okay? Or a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm not having the aspartame, but I'll have the Splenda, because that's maybe not as bad for you. Well, Splenda actually is made from chlorine, and that's what it's broken down to into your body. Your body cannot rid of all of the chlorine that is broken down from this Splenda. With moderate consumption, 96.7% of sucralose leaves your body, which leaves the rest of it there, which breaks down in that chlorine. And under higher consumption, which would be more of, on a daily basis, that falls to only 92.8% of it leaving your body, which then leaves a buildup of chlorine in your cells and in your organs, which then is going to change how our body can function, and it's going to decrease our overall function, and becomes toxic to our cells overall. So one thing we definitely really need to focus on is eating nutritious foods. So having a balanced, healthy diet with nutritious foods can help the body and the mind function optimally. So one big thing is eat protein. Protein is not only necessary to build muscle, but it also promotes alertness of the body, while carbohydrates tend to trigger fatigue overall. So especially that's going to kind of give you that big crash after eating, which that can also be with kids. That's definitely something that can occur with them. And then, 2 hours after lunch, they kind of get that little drowsy and look like they're all going to fall asleep when they're listening. That can exactly be from it. And one thing that can really help to prevent that is making sure that when you do eat carbohydrates, that you eat a protein with it. By eating them together, that's going to slow that absorption of that carbohydrate in your body. Also, you want to make sure to eat plenty omega-3 fatty acids. And the reason why is our body cannot make these on its own. They have to be part of our diet. We have to eat them, or we have to take supplements for them for our body to get those. Those omega-3s are so important, just like we talked about back in pregnancy. We use those omega-3s, those healthy fats, for the growth of our nervous system, the development of the nervous system, and also with the functioning of our brain. So we have to have those fats there, especially when we're talking about kids, because all those things with them are still growing. So some ways to get it in your diet are with cold water, fish, oils, and seeds. Okay? So cold water fish, that's going to be more of like your salmon. Seeds, big ones, flaxseed, and with some different oils you can get it. But it's hard to get kids to eat those things. Definitely. But kids tend to love smoothies, right? So one thing you can do is you can take some flax seeds, you can put it in their smoothie, blend it up. They won't even know that they are eating them. You can hide lots of things in there. Also, some ways that you might be able to get them. Some kids do like nuts. Walnuts do have some omega-3s. Also spinach. I'm going to be honest, I also hide spinach in my smoothies. It does not change the taste of the smoothie, especially like a great like banana and berry smoothie. Throw some spinach in it, grind it up fine, or blend it up fine, and you won't even know it's there. Another healthy source of fats for our brain is avocado. That's actually what I recommend for every child's first food, is even avocado, because it helps to really give some healthy fats for the brain. And I know a lot of kids do like things like guacamole, or I've even heard of that being put in chicken salad, and it, once again, kind of hides the taste there. Also, you can supplement your omega-3s, and they actually do even make some good tasting kid supplements in the omega-3s. A great brand is Nordic Naturals. It's a brand that we carry here in the office. It's the brand of omega-3s that I take. They make some great kids ones that I have tried, and I actually like them. They taste pretty yummy. They have strawberry flavor. There's another one that's called gummy fish food, and it literally tastes like you're eating a healthy fruit snack. It is awesome. So omega-3s, like we talked about, contribute to several facets of brain function, including sending neurological signals and creating dopamine, which the lack thereof being one of the causes of ADHD. Also, one other thing that you can do is you can remove any allergens from the diet, because they can definitely interfere with proper brain function. So if you're having trouble determining which part of the diet is a problem for your child, I would definitely recommend an elimination diet. And that's something that I talk with a lot of my practice members about who have kids, especially with those symptomatologies. And they've had a lot of success with it. Your two biggest food allergies that relate to behavior are going to be milk and gluten. The issues with those are that the protein in the milk and the gluten a lot of times cannot be digested fully in our bodies, which then, as a result, it starts to create some byproducts. Those byproducts send messages, or it can go up to our brain, and they start to create almost like a cocaine-like effect into our bodies, which then is going to be big stimulants. When we're stimulated, it usually relates to hyperactivity and reduced ability to focus and concentrate overall. So once again, the two big symptoms that we're talking about. And I have definitely had success, and also in addition with chiropractic care, we'll talk about that later, but with eliminating some foods, and it's different really for each child. I've had success with just milk, I've had success with just gluten, and I've had success with removing both of them, depending on the child, but had immense changes in their behavior. So also you want to have a helpful environment. So you want to create a positive environment for your child who has ADHD. Every child has challenges. You want to make sure that the child knows that they're loved and appreciated. Having ADHD does not mean that that child is of less value at all, but a lot of times, and especially with those type of diagnoses, there's a stigma attached to it. And that's something that you definitely do not want to portray onto your child. And you also want to make sure that those who are in their environment, so whether that be their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, other loved ones, even their teachers, are not portraying any stigma onto them, like they can't be as successful as other children who don't have the same diagnosis, because they definitely can. So also you want to make sure if your child has ADHD, make sure that his or her teacher knows and can create that supportive environment in the classroom. Also, I know with my practice members who have done some of these changes, we've actually used the teacher as a big asset for us, because we have just asked the teacher to kind of document and send quick emails to the parents about how that child's behavior is doing. Just so that we can see, okay, what changes, especially when you're talking about that elimination diet, what changes are good and what changes are that we're doing maybe in their home life or in their diet or in their activity levels are not making the same changes in their school life. So we definitely were able to use that, and we were able to see that after, I mean, for this child, it was after a few weeks of changing their diet and their adjustment, that there were huge changes in the behavior, but we would never know that if we didn't have that teacher on our side. And the teacher was very supportive in us working with them and working on these natural ways to remove those symptomatology. Another big thing is creating structure in the child's day. children who tend to have these developmental disorders, especially when we're talking about ADD or ADHD, or even when we're talking about this, that even goes into further disorders when we're talking about more like autism and Asperger's, they really, really thrive on structure. They thrive on planned things out. They strive more on boundaries and clearly knowing what their boundaries are. Because when they have that, they are able to kind of know what they can and cannot do and what they can do to almost help their body be able to cope with some of the symptoms that they're feeling, but still have it be okay to do in what they're allowed to do. So they really thrive off of that. You also want to let him or her help you develop their daily schedule. So then they also feel like they do have a little bit of control of what is going on in their day. Not only can a structure help your child stay on track to getting things done, but it can also help them feel more secure about having that set routine and kind of knowing what's next in their day. Another thing is keeping organized. Children who stay organized have a better chance of keeping track of homework, tasks, projects. That's whether they have ADHD or not, and really that thing that goes along the same with adults. So another thing, and I've kind of touched a little bit here and there about that, is that chiropractic care can really, really help these kids and even these adults. So chiropractic care is one of the best things that you can do to help alleviate the symptoms of ADHD. When the spine is out of its correct alignment, it can create interference in the signals in the nervous system, and that the signals that nervous system is trying to send up to our brain. Proper brain activity is directly related to proper alignment and function of the postural muscles of the spine. So, when we are talking about that specifically, we are talking about the muscles that attach here on the spine, okay? When these bones cannot move correctly, those muscles are not going to be able to be stimulated correctly. They're not going to then be able to send that right information through those nerves and up to the brain. And actually, approximately 60% of our information that our brain gets comes from these muscles. So they obviously are huge, huge stimulants to that brain activity. So the postural muscles generate approximately 60% of all the messages that travel to the brain. When the messages are not generated correctly, the brain is not adequately stimulated. It's not getting the appropriate feedback from its environment. So then they feel like they need more stimulation so that they can get that same information up to the brain. It can almost be thought of as like you have this itch and you want to scratch it, but you can't, and you just can't reach it. So, but you really feel like you need to scratch it, and then maybe you'll scratch it some like with your nail, but you feel like it just needs to be scratched more and more and more. That's almost somewhat of what their brain is telling their bodies. Okay, I'm getting some stimulation here, but you got to move more because our joints send stimulation up to our brain, especially when our postural muscles aren't sending the adequate amount. So they need to move more so that they can get that same stimulation up to their brain. So maybe what was just them moving their hand now turns to them kicking and kicking the desk of the chair in front of them, or any of those behaviors, but that's because they're trying to get that stimulation up to the brain that their body isn't getting. So correcting the root cause of the problem and removing subluxations, which I'll explain those in a minute, can help to relieve the symptoms of ADHD long-term and promote brain development in helping these postural muscles work correctly and send the right messages to the brain. So we talked about how the postural muscles attach to these vertebrae here, okay? So what can happen is that these vertebrae, or all these bones of your spine, is they can subluxate, which what that means is that that bone stops moving correctly and actually kind of gets stuck. When it's stuck there, it can also cause irritation of the nerves that come out in between each one of those vertebrae. Those nerves go to send messages of how our whole entire body is supposed to function and how it's supposed to work. So that's going to mean everything from moving our legs to talking to thinking to moving our hands to our heart beating to digesting food, breathing, all of that stuff all comes from these nerves. So when these bones aren't moving correctly, we have a twofold issue there. These nerves aren't able to function correctly and tell the body how to work correctly. Also, these postural muscles here on the side, they're not being able to be stimulated correctly because the spine can't move correctly. And since those muscles attached to the spine, it's really linked together with the postural muscles in the spinal movement. So those postural muscles aren't working correctly. They're not being able to generate the right information to send up to the brain. The brain isn't able to correct the right to create the right information, or to send that down the nerve or down the spinal cord and out these nerves, because once again, that spine is subluxated and those nerves can't function correctly. So basically, you end up with a twofold problem of you can't get the right information in and you're not getting the right information out, which definitely would not mean that the body would be able to function correctly. So what we do, and this is something really that we focus on here at this office, is what we do is we adjust those subluxated vertebrae, get them moving better, so that we can work on correcting both of that twofold problem. We can get the right information to be able to be made and sent up to the brain from those postural muscles because we can move better, we can create that movement. Also, the right messages can be created by our brain, sent down our spinal cord and out those nerves, and those nerves can tell the rest of our body how to function correctly. So that twofold bad just turned into a twofold good. So in conclusion, ultimately how you choose to help your child's ADHD is really your decision. Because as parents, that's one of the responsibilities that you hold, is you hold that decision making for your child. Well, one big thing for us and why we really recommend going in that natural route, or at least trying that first, is because if you can just help their body's ability, your child's body ability to function better, then that's not only going to help them with trying to reduce these symptoms, that's also going to help their whole body work better, and it's going to help them be a healthier child. And we know healthier children grow into healthier adults, and it's going to set them up for really a better path in life. And one of the other great things about the natural remedies is there is little to no risk of complications overall, which is a big difference than what we find in most medications. So whether an individual has ADHD or not, the tips listed above can help to improve their health and overall function of the brain and the body really for everyone. That's one of the other recommendations that I tend to make, is that it is very hard, especially when you have multiple kids in the household, to make one of them stop eating this, but everyone else can. So really, it's got to be a family thing. The whole family has to be on board. When we're talking about especially things like those nutritional changes, I mean really, if you know that giving that healthier food to your child who has symptoms will help to get rid of that symptom and help their body function better, why wouldn't you want to give that food to your other children? Because you know that's going to make them healthier also. Same thing with getting them adjusted. You know that that's doing great things for your child who has symptoms, whose body isn't functioning the best. Well, just look at the rest of your children who already have pretty good functioning bodies. What can you do to just help amp their health up more, get their bodies functioning even better? So really, we would be happy to schedule you for an appointment for chiropractic care, or just really be a resource in any further guidance that we can give to you in improving the symptoms of ADHD or in the rest of your family's overall health.